So today we're going to do a new demonstration with the new Quick Mask Pro panel for UXP. And what we are going to mask today are two images. This one and another one. This is a landscape. This image has been provided by Harold Biebel, and he had a few questions about it. So we're going to discuss this later. But first, this flower, and both objects, the flower and also the landscape with the tree, are quite challenging to mask. Not so much because it's difficult to mask those objects with the panel, but mostly because of the translucent character of the flower and also the translucent character of the trees. So basically, many natural objects have this kind of translucency that is very hard to mask, and if not, even impossible to mask, especially when you're trying to push the contrast. So basically, the more translucent an object is, and the more you push the contrast, the more you're going to experience difficulties with correctly masking it. It's actually impossible to accurately mask it. So basically, what you need to do is to, if you have a translucent object, is to try to keep the contrast to a normal kind of level. So basically, when you're trying to push the contrast with something like, let's say, make a pure black background of this, then you're pushing the contrast quite hard, and then all sorts of fringing and artifacts will be visible, simply because it's almost impossible to accurately predict and to adjust the translucency within, let's say, a leaf in such a way that it actually represents the translucent character of it. And you can get away with that if you try to keep the contrast to a normal level. Okay, I'm going to show you. So let's start with this flower. So what I'm going to do is to mask this flower, and then on top of that I'm going to push the contrast real hard so you can see what kind of effect it has on the flower. We have the panel, and what I would do is to just go with the auto subject detect. You can also do the manual object detect, but for this time I'm just going to go with this. But before I do that, I'll let Photoshop do the work and let Photoshop try to create a selection of this flower so you can compare it with the results of the panel. Because a lot of people think that the panel doesn't really add to what Photoshop is already doing, but I can tell you, and that's also already mentioned in the manuals, that unless you're doing portraiture, it's basically adding quite a lot to the mask that Photoshop can create for you, whether you're using the subject selection tool, which is quite accurate, or the object detection tool, which is a little bit less accurate than the subject selection tool. So here I've created the selection with the subject selection tool. I'm going to save it as a reference, call it SS for subject selection by Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to deselect selection. I'm going to show you how it looks like. So it looks pretty decent, right, at first sight, but just have a look here. Okay, so let's take a look at this part. You see that, for example, here, it's missing quite a lot, right? I mean, it's missing the stems over there, and it's missing all the details over here. So if I zoom in like this, you can see it. Well, it's not too bad, but it's missing quite a lot, right? I mean, you can also show it here. And by the way, this is not my photograph. It's submitted to me by someone who prefers to remain anonymous, but what he wanted is to have a mask of this with a very clean edge. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do, but you can see here that what Photoshop is doing is not too bad, but it's nowhere near too accurate. Okay, so now I'm going to do this with the panel, and I'm just going to go with auto subject detect. And basically here, since there's no sky in the background, you should actually be choosing one of those presets. But like I said in the manual, is if you have a very neutral and smooth background, like in this case, you could also try with the sky behind the subject, because then the software is able to detect this as a sort of sky, and then the selection will become even more accurate. Because the thing is that if you have a sky in your photo, then it has simply more information for its algorithm to come up with a better mask. Okay, the more information you indicate and give to the software, the better the mask will be. So I can go with no sky behind subject or with this one. So compared with the previous panel, the older version of QuickMask Pro, the zone that you used to come up with the base mask was very, very critical. So for example, if you would click on high key, that would make a lot of a difference if you compared it with low key. So it took a little bit more time to find the right kind of zone. In this case, the panel is far more forgiving. So it doesn't really matter if you choose high key or low key. The differences are very minimal. Okay, in this case, and that's something that I would always recommend, is to just start with one of the middle zones and then compare it with the rest. So if you create, for example, mid-high, and you see that something is missing there, then you can go with the adjacent zone like high key or low mid and work your way from there. So basically I would suggest one of the middle zones like mid-high or low mid. Well, I'm not going to bother you with all the possibilities, but I can show you what I've done and what I'm going to do right now, and that is that I've already figured out that low mid is basically the best channel to go with. But let me try to create those for you first. So now I've created them. You see them here, and you see that it's actually not a bad mask already. So let me zoom in. I can show you and already compare it with the auto subject selection mask from Photoshop, that it's already much better. So this is our mask and this is from Photoshop. Okay, you see that if you, for example, compare it here, this is Photoshop's mask. Well, this is much more accurate, of course, right? Still, I'm missing some stems over here, but I can easily refine that later on. But to show you that it doesn't really matter what kind of zone you're using, well, actually it still matters, but it's less critical than with the previous panel. I can create one with the high key, for example, like so. So if you look at a high key version, for example, and so these are the three high key masks, and these are the low mid masks that I started with. If I compare, let's say, high key number 1 with this one, you see that there's just a slight difference, not so much. It's not that critical anymore which zone you choose, albeit that if you choose the right zone, it's still important to choose the right zone, because then you know what kind of adjacent zone you need to use if you are going to refine the mask. So for example, this one compared with this one, you see that here there's more detail there with the low mid, and high key has a little bit less detail there, but here it's better, the high key. But overall I would say the low mid is just better. So I'm not going to use those. I'm going to remove those, and then I'm going to work my way going through the final mask with the low mid. So if you compare low mid 1 with low mid 2 and low mid 3, there are slight differences. If you look here, for example, in this section, you see that there are some differences there, but it's not really big. So I'm going to try to find out which mask I'm going to use. So basically, the panel always generates 3 masks, 3 base masks, and you only have to choose one, obviously, to refine. You don't have to use all 3 of them. Like a user suggested that, well, he was complaining that he needs to work his way around with the 3 base masks. But of course, you don't have to do that. It's just here for your convenience. The panel creates 3 base masks that you can choose from. Again, just choose the base mask that you can try to refine. So in this case, I think I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go with number 3 because it has a little bit more accuracy. So let me look here. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with 3. So I'm going to get rid of those, just select them and then delete them. So number 3 is going to be the mask that I'm going to use. And let me try to compare it again with the Photoshop selection, this Photoshop selection, and you see that there's no detail there at all. I mean, all the openings here that you see here, you don't see that represented by this mask by Photoshop, and it is represented here. And if you look a little bit more closely, then you will see that also in my mask I still need to add a lot of detail. Just look at those smaller details like here and there, and of course they're not represented by the Photoshop mask, but also not by mine, but I'm going to fix that in a few seconds. So this is the mask that I'm going to start with, and so for that I'm going to go to Refine Mask, and I'm going to go with, not with Quick Refine, because Quick Refine is just there to just darken and lighten things, but if you want to add back details, you always have to use Advanced Refine. So Advanced Refine is also going to darken and lighten a little bit, but it is also going to add missing details. Okay, and that's something that Quick Refine doesn't do. Just forget about optimization of the mask here. That's an additional feature that we're not going to discuss today. Okay, but Quick Refine, Advanced Refine, the biggest difference is that with Advanced Refine you can add back details. So that's exactly what I need, and that's what I'm going to do. So basically what I already said in the manual, but also said in the first video, and that was already the case in the previous version of the panel, is that you always have to go with the not with the exact zone as for which you created the base mask from. Okay, so in this case low mid, but with one of the adjacent zones, because usually that is the best zone to start your refinements with. Okay, so always choose the adjacent zone. And if you think that perhaps the same zone as the base mask would also give you some good results, and feel free to try that out, because sometimes, you know, it will just make it it can add a little bit more to your mask. So in this case I'm just going to start with the adjacent zone. So low mid, the adjacent zone is either low key or mid high. So looking at the photo, you know, I don't think it's low key, it's more towards mid high, right? I mean, if it's low key, then the background should be much darker. Let's say just a zone difference between the object itself and the background. But here there's quite a big difference, so that's why I would choose mid high, because I believe that will give me the best results for advanced refinement. So click on that. Make sure you already selected the correct entry, mid high in this case. So create mid high. So what it does is to create some temporary mask that you don't have to use, so just ignore that, because those are the masks that the panel will use to come up with a better mask. Okay. So here I've created mid high. So now I'm going to stand on my channel that I want to refine. I'm just going to zoom in. So let's say that I just want to improve this entire section there. So what I'm going to do is to just, well, I can use this, okay, my rectangular marquee tool, just indicate what I want, and I do this separately. And to make sure that any refinements that you will do here will let's say blend subtly with the adjacent areas that are not going to be changed here, what I do then, what I would recommend doing, is to just go in here and to select, modify, feather. So just feather this, and the suggested feathering is around 15 pixels if you have this kind of image, this size. If it's a much smaller image, like something like 1000 by 1000 pixels, then of course I would suggest something like 5 pixels. But this is I believe it's a 35 or 40 megapixel photo, so I would go with 15 pixels as feathering. Click OK. I'm going to save that because I might need it again. So temp 1. Okay, there we go. So this is the one. So now I'm gonna try to bring back the details in there. Alright, so here you have, for example, all those stamps. Okay, I want to bring them back, but also those smaller details there, that like here. Okay, that is not represented by this. So just stand on there and now try to come up with the correct strength. So in the beginning it's just a matter of trying to experiment. Okay, what's going to give you the best result? And I think perhaps 3 is the recommended setting to start with. You can always go lower or higher. So I've already selected this entire area. I'm just going to click on white, and you see that's going to go way too wide. So that's not the right one. So I'm going to go a little bit lower. So I just went back one step in history. That's still way too much. So in this case I think I have to go with 1. So you see that? So I went with 1, and now I've added all those details back in there. So it's just one click. Okay, you just have to find the right kind of setting. So this before, I can show you again, and this is after with one click, and the stamps are back in here, and also those details. So again, before, after. Okay, this is just one click, and I can show you again here. This is the photo. All those tiny details you see there, and those details, and they're all back there. They're all being represented by the mask, like here. And the stamps that were gone previously, like here, they've been added back again. Here too, and it needs a little bit more white there, but I'm going to check it, and you see that those small leaves are a little bit translucent, so that is basically represented by the darker tones that you see here. Okay, but I still think that it might need a little bit more correction, so I'm gonna do that. But you see that this is getting lighter as well, but that's not a problem. I will show you why not, because I can easily correct it. So I'm gonna load this again because I just want to have a little bit more white there. So just click on that, and now it's getting even lighter. But now I'm gonna load it, and now I'm just gonna create a bigger selection. I'm gonna feather it as well with 15, and I'm gonna try to bring back the black. Okay, again, start with 3. You can always go back in the settings if it's too much, but I'm gonna click on that. So that's not enough. I should have saved the selection. Feather. Okay, let's try 4. Okay, I need to do it again. With 4 again. Alright. Once more, and then it should be done, and the rest I can do with the quick refine if I want to. Okay, this here needs a little bit more. Alright, there we go. Yeah, it's almost gone, and I can fix this because this is not critical over here. This is outside of the edge of the flower. So let me have a check. Let me check it. Okay, here for example. Okay, let's have a look here. Those details, they are being represented in here. This is still a little bit dark there, but that's because here it's a little bit translucent. Okay, so I can still fix that, but just try to get a overall impression of what I created. So let me have a closer look here, and you see that the edges are quite jagged, but that's something I can easily correct later on. But let me check this. So all those details are being represented. Let's focus in here. Okay, there it is. Let's focus in here. Okay, another check. Let's focus on this part with the black areas there. Yeah, it should be there. Okay, so I'm still not very happy yet. So what I'm going to do is to delete the mid-high there. Okay, and I'm gonna try another one, another adjacent zone, to see if I can bring back even more details. So I started with low mid, so I could do high key, but I think that's way too far off because that I would skip 2 zones. So I can either try low key or just the bass zone itself, low mid. So I'm going to create that. See maybe if I can add back some more details there. So it's just ignore the temporary channels. It's being created by the panel. Just go in here and see what I can do. See if I can bring back some more details, because here this is a little bit thin. See that, this part there, I just would like to have a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm just gonna do this, select feather 15, and see what I can do with that. So start with 3. Oh yeah, that's much better. So before, I can show you up close. So before, and just look at this part for example, and now it's back there. It looks better. Here the same. I'm just looking here now. It's after, just before. I think it looks better. Okay, and now I want to do the same. Now add some more details in here. Let's go with this. You know what? I'm just gonna select this entire part. Modify feathering 15. Now I'm gonna save it. Okay, 2. Okay. Have a closer look. Alright, so click on white, intensity of 3. Yeah, so it added a little bit more whites in there. In here, let's see what it did. I'm just going to check it a little bit. Let's have a look here. Before, after, and yeah, I think it looks much better. Look at all the details there. So before, after. Okay, so that's much better. Now I want to add some blacks in there, because here it's got a little bit light. So I'm going to use that temp 2 selection again. Okay, now click on black here. Intensity of 3. Okay, that has solved the issue. Let me see. Before, after, and it actually made it a little bit too dark there. So what you can do is to try to make it lighter again by using the same setting. But then, you know, what you can also do is to simply just grab your brush over here. Okay, set it to white, set it to overlay 100%, and just go over it at one pass, like so. Okay, just hit those darker areas, one pass. At the most 2 passes, but I wouldn't recommend going beyond 2 passes, because then you will degrade the edges. So here 1 pass should be okay to fix those final things there. And here 2. I could have tried this out with the advanced refine as well, but you know, since I know that I can fix it like this with 1 pass, so I'm not releasing the mouse, then it's actually faster to do it like that. Okay, so here we have it. Alright, and compare it with this. Just have a look here. Yeah. Okay, even those tiny details that you see here, those holes, those openings there, you see that they are being represented there. And this opening there. Okay, let's have a look here. This is more complicated. Let me see, and Yeah, it's basically there. And now just compare it with what Photoshop did. Well, that is, yeah, it's not even comparable. You know, it's complete difference. Okay, so yeah, I think I've done that. I think I'm happy with that. Actually, I should do this too, and so I need to check that here. You see that there's something missing there, so I'm gonna fix that because I only did the top part, and so let's do this entire section like so, or maybe even that part. And let's say I want to add to that this part and add this part. Okay, so basically I'm targeting this entire area, so feather it a little bit. Okay, and I'll save that. Temp 3. Okay, and I'm gonna try it with this again. See what happens. Okay, you see that this is immediately fixed, but here it's a little bit lighter, so I can load the same one again, but maybe in this case I'm just gonna go with something like this and just subtract that part, because this doesn't need any adjustments. I'm just gonna subtract that and say give me some black for there, and it's almost fixed. And here it's better to just go over it manually because this is outside of the critical edge of the mask. So set it to black foreground color, overlay 100%. It's important to set it to overlay because then you'll not affect the pure whites that you see there. So just go in here. Okay, here you see that I can go over it without affecting it. Alright, so I've corrected that, and this has been corrected as well because this was before. You see that? There. Sorry, here. This here. Now fix that like so. And just look at this. This, that. They all look very decent. Okay, I think I'm done for now. Just delete all the temporary channels created by the software. Don't forget to do that. I can also get rid of those. Alright, so this is what I have. Okay, so, but actually I don't want the bottle, so I'm just going to get rid of the bottle. So the way to do that is just go to Photoshop detection tool, and okay, let Photoshop do the work. There it is. I just want to subtract that from what I have here. So basically what I do now is to just go to quick refine and say just make it completely black, because that's not what I need. So here you see that there's still some white lines there, but I can fix that by going to brush, overlay 100%, just go over it like that. Okay, so here I have my mask of the flower. Okay, now the question is how good is it? And the only way to find out is to just apply it in a mask, in a layer mask. So what I'm going to try to do is to load this and then copy it in here. Let's see what it does. Okay, so I'm going to load that selection. There it is. That's, and I'm standing on my background layer. Now I'm going to copy it. Alright, and I'm going to paste it in this transparent layer. There it is. Okay, so now it's pasted, and now I'm going to show you what happens if I use this background. Okay, so this is a very normal kind of background. It's not too dark, not too light, and you see that, you know, that if you look here, I'm zooming in at 200%, it already looks quite good, right? I mean, those details that you see there, this original background, the new background, they're all being represented by the mask. Just look here, look there. You don't see any fringing. Okay, the mask needs to be optimized here because it's a little bit jagged if you zoom into 300%, but some people even prefer that, to have this hard edge. And there might be several reasons for that, but personally I like a more softer edge so that it looks a little bit more natural. But I'm going to try to do that later on. For now, just take a look at what's happening here. So those details are all there, and you don't see any fringing, not even at 300%. So this is the original. So all details are being represented in here, and I think it looks very, very good. Even those small details like this and that, see, it's there. Here too. Okay, just have a look at those tiny little details. Well, just barely. Okay, so I should have tried to add a little bit more white to that by using the advanced refinement a little bit more, but I think you can already see how effective this is. Okay, so I said the more translucent an object is, and the more you push the contrast, like with a black background, then you will see that you will have a few issues. And now you can see that here, that it has a lot of fringing, right? I mean, you see all those halos, and that's simply because you know that around the edges, this flower is often a little bit more translucent than in the middle of the object itself, like in here. So that's why you see all those fringing, while here in a normal background it looks pretty decent. Well, actually it is not pretty decent, it's very decent. Okay, there's nothing wrong. But if you push the contrast with translucent object, you see this. Okay, so there's a very simple way to well, improve on that, and that is by improving the mask. Okay, so let me go in here. So what I would suggest doing is to go to your mask, alright, and then you can say load selection. Okay, that's this one, and I would go into, well, there's several ways, but let me demonstrate a few ones. Okay, I would go to select a mask, for example, and I would say, okay, I would do this here so I can see what's happening. Alright, let's me zoom in a little bit. Like this. Okay, so personally I like a little bit of feathering so you don't have the jagged edges. So I would set it to something roughly 0.4, okay, because I don't want to feather it too much. And in this case I'm also going to shift the edge, and to know what kind of direction you need to go is to just play with it like this. And you see that if I do this, then it will go outside of the mask, and those halos will become even more prominent. So I have to go with it with the minus. You see that? Then it's almost gone. So in this case I would suggest, so that's just my preference, something, anything between, let's say, -10 and -35, 40. And in this case I'm just going to go with something like this. Okay, because then you will get rid of those edges. Okay, so click OK now. I'm going to save that as optimized with a feathering of 0.4 and a shift minus, I think it was 29, maybe 25, but doesn't really matter. Okay, there it is. Okay, now I'm gonna load that new mask. I'm gonna, so this was with the original mask that hasn't been optimized. Now I'm gonna do it with this one. Okay, so I'm gonna load that again. Alright, copy it from here. Alright, and I'm going to paste it in here in group 2 for my second test. So that's paste. Alright. It's group 2. I'm gonna have a closer look. And again, let me do this first with the normal background. Here it looks actually very, very good, right? I mean, it's a normal contrast adjustment, not too much. See how it looks like. It is very accurate, so those details are still very visible there too. All those tiny details without any fringing. Okay, now let's see how it looks when I turn on this, the black background, and you see that it's still there, but it's a lot less than with the mask that hasn't been optimized. So this with the optimized mask. Okay, and this is original. So let me compare that. This with optimization, with the feathering and the shift. This without it. Okay, so you see the halos and the fringing. And this looks much better already. But again, you really have to work hard if you are pushing the contrast this much with translucent objects. So basically I would recommend to not push the contrast too hard if you're dealing with translucent objects. Okay, so that's one way of dealing with it, and there's another way, and that is to, okay, I'm gonna show you that. I'm gonna go in here, I'm just gonna duplicate that, do it some other way. Just get rid of that layer. Alright, and I'm gonna leave it like this. So what I'm gonna do right now is to just load the original again. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. Alright, this one. Alright, and I'm gonna create the mask there. Good, turn it on. So I've just loaded it, and the original one, so without optimization. And here there's no problem. Okay, there's a bigger problem here, like now. Alright, so you see those jagged edges. So suppose that you want to correct that, but you only want to correct it locally, not all over the image, but in specific areas. So let's say that I want to correct it here. So basically what you can do then is stand on the mask. So this is how the mask looks like, okay, because I've loaded it in my layer mask. So I loaded the channel mask inside of my layer mask with a selection. Okay, then I did this, and now what I can do now is to just grab my brush again, set it to black, set it to overlay, and while you're standing on the mask, you do this. Okay, just one pass. Okay, I'm going to zoom in over here. So basically you're getting rid of it using the original mask, and since the edges in the mask are not pure black or pure white, it will be affected when I go over it with my brush. And I can also set it to normal. Okay, but then you do way too much. You can do this, so don't do that. Set it to overlay, and then you can fix it like this. So that is if you want to have a little bit more control over what you're doing. Just do this, because if you look here, mask mode, you see this happening. See that? The mask will be refined then. Okay, that is something that I would recommend if you want to do something very specific with specific areas, like for example in here, just stand on the mask, not on the image itself, but on the mask, and just go over here, and you can do something like this. Okay, so this is what you can do, and there are more ways of correcting the mask, make it better, but this is one of a few ways to correct the mask and make it even better. Okay, I forgot to say that if you have adjusted the mask like this with using the layer mask, and you've adjusted it with the brush and the foreground color set to black, overlay, I did this to come up with a tighter and cleaner edge. Okay, let me do it again. So the more passes, the more cleaner, the tighter the mask will be. And let me do it here too. And there. I think. Okay, let's do it in here. You see that? So basically you can clean it up like this very quickly and come up with a much tighter mask. And if you think it's not enough, just go over it a few times, but not too many times, of course. I would say 2-3 times at the most. Okay, and I can show you how it looks like here, original and this. See, it looks pretty decent. Here, you can do it again, make it a little bit tighter. So suppose you've done that and you want to save the mask, then what you have to do is to stand on that mask there, on the layer mask, go to channels, and you will see here that the mask is there. Okay, if I don't stand on that layer mask, but on the image, you will see that it's gone. Well, actually it's not gone, it's still there. Okay, I thought it would be gone, but normally it's like this. Okay, you have to stand over there, and there's the mask. So I duplicate that. Okay, and then you have your corrected mask. And if you are done with this, okay, here you see now the mask is gone. So if I stand here or there, you will see it back again. Background copy mask there. So that's basically the layer mask. If I stand over here, it will be gone. But I've copied that. So I can use this one here as a saved mask, as a saved channel, because it's already there, because I copied it. Okay, so that's the way that you can easily transfer the layer mask to the channel mask.